Hey, welcome. This is Bob Pellerin, CTOBOB, and today I'll be talking about VMware. Right now, as you can tell by the background, there is the VMworld going on. This is a premier multi-cloud event, and what they're doing is they're broadcasting this live basically throughout the world. And of course, they've got breakout sessions. Specifically, they are talking about security. They're talking about the multi-cloud, and they're talking about improvements to the base VMware. So what I thought we'd do today is take a quick look and actually more or less comment about some of your environments out there. I get a lot of people that question why we need to continually change, why do we need to keep innovating, changing things. People get used to certain way of doing things. Not only that, but within software, within environments, they're used to, go here, go to the second one, click on the left, and they get very set in their ways, I guess is the best way to frame it. And part of the problem with that, and I'll be very frank, is as the CEO of VMware said earlier, for example, during his presentation, is if you go ahead and don't innovate, actually I'm paraphrasing, it's not exactly how he said it, but if you stop moving forward, you stagnate. And what's really important, and I'll make some more videos about this, is security. Now, security is not something that you can just put a padlock on and walk away and things are secure. There's always somebody somewhere out there that is willing and able and aggressively trying to break, find bugs and get into your systems, especially if you are in an environment where you've got credit card information or you've got, you get the idea. So the point is to make sure that you are always secure. So the products, whether it be an operating system such as the ESXi, which VMware that runs other operating systems such as Linux or Windows or others. Well, at that point, if there's flaws, if there's problems, they need to go back and they need to make sure that they fix these as quickly as possible. Also, the other thing is as new hardware comes out, these things do run on physical boxes, whether they want to talk ever about the hardware. You have no choice. At the end of the day, we're sitting on top of hardware somewhere, whether it's in a cloud, in a hosted environment, or whether it's in your office or your home. Definitely, there is hardware there. By the way, if you like these videos, please give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing. That's really appreciated. Now, one of the presentations that we have here basically talks about let's see if I can get it going here. I don't want to steal their thunder. Really, the whole point was just to review in my own words and to just keep it simple. If you go to any of these more recent VMworlds and you go to any of the products, there is a complexity setting in. They're not content with only running an operating system on top of hardware or running multiple operating systems on top of their virtual environment. It gets crazier and crazier every year. And by crazier, I mean there are so many products, so many brandings, so many ways of doing things. For example, if you don't know what a Kubernetes is, you have these containers that you can put applications in, and they're basically self-contained environments. I'm sort of making this as simple as I can. If you don't know what those are and you don't code, you probably don't care about that at this point. But moving forward, you're going to start hearing a lot of technologies like that. And they're not relatively new, but they're not for everyone. So if you're smaller, medium-sized business, you may not have encountered it. You may not care at this point. If your vendors, if the applications that you're using are not suggesting them or bringing them up, they're probably not ready for it. And so you probably are not going to jump onto that bandwagon. However, with the proliferation of cloud services, whether it be things like Office 365, AWS, you are, whether you want to or not, confronted by these different service providers. Let's face it, if you have employees that go home and use Google Drive, they use OneDrive, whether you want to change or whether your vendors tell you to change or not, you're going to be confronted with the cloud services at a minimum as they keep expanding. So from that point of view, VMware is obviously trying to counter that by providing you with more management tools, with ways of integrating into different providers. And that's where they keep coming up with this multi-cloud. So it's not that, there's more than one internet. It's literally there's more than one provider. So having said that, you want to keep modernizing as you move along for security's sake, primarily. Of course, if you're running things in-house, you'll want to consider moving things to the cloud eventually if you haven't already started to do so. And at some point, you'll end up being sort of 1 foot in and 1 foot out type of scenario where you've got a hybrid environment and you've got to manage both in and out. And this is a way where you can start using these new tools. Again, they're not relatively, they're not new, and they're new to you potentially. The idea is that you can have familiar tools that will work for both internal virtual machines and external or on the cloud virtual machines. So I'm going to take a quick look at what they're actually announcing. And I haven't previewed this. I thought we'd sort of explore them with us. And the whole idea here is that, again, they're talking about modernizing. They're talking about cloud operating models. And security, of course, is always a concern. And it's always up front on our list of things that we look at when we want to transition to anything new. What is the transition part? And what will we end up with in the end? So the whole point is we want to make sure that it is easier to administer. We want to make sure that it is more secure and overall that it gives more reliability to, at the end of the day, the end users must have a reliable system to be able to use, whether it's, producing invoices, taking orders, actual production, whatever may be the case. All of those things to those departments are critical and important. And to your business, of course, if you've got any one of the components, if you can produce and you can invoice and life is great, but the shipping portion doesn't work, you've got the same problem as if you had it at the production level to some degree. So at the end of the day, it is the weakest link is the problem. And so by trying to get better and better tools, more visibility, we end up in a scenario where, in theory, you start reducing, I dare say, the complexity of it because there's a single point of contact, if possible, or fewer points of contact, so you don't have to have a lot of different systems that are disconnected that you need to maintain and keep track of and so forth. So let's take a quick look. I mentioned containers briefly earlier, and this is some of their numbers here that they're throwing out there. So saying 54% of container instances will be deployed primarily in the data center by 2023. I mean, that is the trend. And that's what I was trying to get at earlier is where, I still love the environment that is physical. We have got servers, and I've showed lots of servers. We take a look at them, we put VMware, we put operating system. That is great for labs, for testing, for smaller environments, medium size. You do have some firms that either for security's sake or from a mindset point of view, I have clients that say, hey, I don't feel comfortable putting my data over on Google or Amazon or Microsoft or whoever you're using. And that's okay. I mean, at some point, whether it is true or not, whether it is more secure, look, I can't attest to exactly what it looks like on the Google server end or on the AWS end and so forth. I mean, even if any of us could go and audit, the very next day something could happen and it could mean that the environment is less secure. So from that point of view, there is no perfect system, even internally. All it takes is an employee with a virus on their laptop comes in, plugs in, and things could go astray there. So there is no perfect environment, and this is obviously why you want to have duplication of data, good backups, and so forth. So I'm jumping a little bit all over the place. I hope it's okay with everybody. So the idea is, of course, when you start looking at where they're moving towards, they're talking about accelerating the apps. They're really pushing for the developers to embrace a lot of these more recent technologies, not to say new. And the point there is that if you built with the cloud in mind, if you built with the resilience in mind, and you built with all these back-end efficiencies in mind, then you end up with more resilient, more stable, easier to distribute apps. And so that's one of the things that they're pushing. And of course, when you do this, because they're being recreated with newer tools, there's an improvement in, potentially in security and management and efficiency of distribution and use. So look, I don't want to go through all of their slides. Really, one of the things that I wanted to really push in this video was to go back and show roughly what what they've gotten you for. I apologize, I'm jumping here, and my aim here is not to. Okay, so here's the update. So they're showing here part of the update 3. So easier configuration, retrieve. So of course they're talking about the with Tanzu, and let me just go back here. So part of the things that you'll see from a point of view of where everything else is going, not only that, but there is a larger role for the GPUs out there. As I may have mentioned in one of my previous hardware reviews, the GPUs are becoming more and more important. Why? Because we're using more and more artificial intelligence as an example. And so we can rely and we can depend on the GPUs to accomplish certain calculations, certain just computational processing power is at the GPU for some of these technologies. And so instead of relying on the CPU, the main processor, the Xeon, for example, if you're using an Intel, that's being pushed off to the GPU because it is more efficient at certain types of calculations. And that's where that's coming from. So this is why you'll see that they will continually increase the ability to put in better and better GPUs in there. And of course, with virtual environments, you can do something called pass-through. So you can literally have one of your VMs connect directly to pieces of hardware, including things like USB ports and so forth. So you can allocate that piece of hardware, just the USB ports, but etc. But what you do then is you will allocate that, and that virtual machine will then have control of it. It is almost as good as bare metal, meaning that it's almost as efficient as being plugged directly, like as if there was no virtualization underneath the operating system of that VM. Of course, there's always the scaling factor in here. I don't know if I'll get to see the full what they've improved from a scalability point of view, but usually what they do is they will add the ability, or they increase rather, the amount of CPUs and memory and so forth that they can cope with at each version. And I say that, but it's not necessarily every single version. So there we go. So they have updates and easy. So lifecycle manager. So what have they added? Handling of patch update recall, the ability to delete objects within, okay, VLCM. Okay, so they can actually, so they can recall stuff. Interesting. This capability, well, as you know, also the NVMe's, if you go and look at some of the presentations, some of the documents that Dell, for example, provided during these sessions, they highlight the fact that more and more of the actual drives being used will be NVMe PCIe drives. And of course, you end up with better performance, you end up with faster response overall, and of course the applications, and you can virtualize more machines potentially because you've got additional speed there. And of course, they're talking about their vSAN. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with vSANs, because I know I went down, I guess, to the base level just to get everybody sort of the basics. But the idea is once you want to scale up, so if you have a single server with a bunch of drives, that's pretty black and white. You put as many drives as you can fit into the machine. At some point, you're going to reach a threshold where you want to have more storage. And I mean, having a single machine with a single bunch of drives, it's okay, but it's really not great for most companies where you're medium or getting larger. You will need multiple servers, for example, and at that point, you want to have the flexibility of not having any actual storage in those machines. And what you're going to want to have is a vSAN. So what you'll do is you'll have storage machines in the back that will act as a pool, and then they will be able to store things. And the machines in the front will act as basically they'll be processing and so forth. They'll be calling on the SAN to connect to data. And you do that so that, in theory, if you have enough machines, of course, if you're just going to put one on both ends, you still have the same problem. But if you've got redundant systems, the idea is that you could have one fail and the VMware or your environment, doesn't have to be VMware specifically, but will detect the error and will then pass the load or take the VM and load it on another machine so that it just continues. And that's high availability. So these are all things that have been around for quite a while. And of course, it scales up relatively well. Of course, there is a cost. The biggest challenge to anybody out there, it's really goes down to cost, is if you're a very large corporation, if you're a grocery store and you have multiple locations and you have, that type of thing, you probably have a budget. And at that point, you'll be able to take full advantage of the great technologies out there, make them more reliant, make them, you can scale, you can do lots of things, and you get efficiency, and you worry less and less about hardware because you've got extra pieces of hardware in there that if something should happen to one of them, you can, hopefully not notice whatsoever that anything went down, except for a text or a message somewhere saying, hey, this server is gone offline, please replace it, or the drive went offline, whatever it is. And then you go back and you can then dispatch someone to change the part, change the server, change whatever it is, and network card and so forth. And you'll be able to offer reliable service that will be available in theory no matter what. Of course, anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and most notably, if you look at the larger players like the Microsofts and so forth, if you look at when they have failures, most of the time it has to do with some updates they have done, or somebody patched something and messed up and got the wrong patch or whatnot. So that happens. All right, so this is the memory monitoring remediation. So they're showing, I'm not trying to recreate what they've done. Really, the whole point is to show you a little bit of what they've added on here. So features enhancements. So now you can do batch snapshots of vVols. I mentioned the NVMe craze. So here you've added some support for NVMe OF and VMFS, so file system 6, and NFS scale to 128 nodes. So again, I was mentioning a potential increase. Here we go. Affinity 3.0 enhancement for CNS. Let's see what else we've got. And really, I think that about covers it. But I hope this was helpful to people out there. I'm going to make some more videos. I'm going to keep listening. It's on right now. So if anybody out there has had other notes or other ideas about what this entails, what this will bring to you, well, we can certainly discuss it. Put it in the comments below. We always appreciate that. You can always visit us at CTOBOB.com. And of course, we appreciate you watching. So see you in the next video.